Hi, this is Bob from Hobby Concepts, and today I'm going to replace an old video that I did a long time ago on how to build the rear axles on a Tamiya semi-truck. This applies to every single Tamiya semi-truck kit. I'm going to take these axles, I'm going to go through step by step how to put them together to get them properly adjusted, and how to lock them if you want to lock them up. Also, I'm going to cover just how to install them on the frame. So this is again a replacement of an old video, and I've learned some things, plus I've seen a lot of errors, and hopefully I can point those out so you don't make them, because I've made some of them. So let's get started. As I mentioned in the opening, it's been a long time since I updated my build the rear axle videos. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to build these two rear axles. I probably won't have that many cuts in it, so the video might be a little long, but it's a follow-along video. And I've learned a lot of things since that first video, because I get to see the mistakes people make. And so I can show you a couple of things that you're going to really want to watch out for. And just want to add a few things that I didn't have in the original video. I updated my how to build a transmission video a while back with things that basically I learned. So now it's time to do the rear axles. So I've got just a selection of the parts here. I'm going to set the axles housings and the axles aside, and we'll go to work first on the differentials. So I use a thick grease inside the diffs. It's the only place I use it, not on the outside, not here, on the inside. And I like this marine grease, but you know, it really doesn't make a heck of a lot of difference. So let's do this. First thing I'll do is open up these little parts here. Now, the way these sit, the diff sits in here, the diff gear, and these three gears, spider gears, fit on this. And this drops in here. There's little notches that fit it. So some people want to lock up this diff to have a locked rear axle. And I've seen suggestions like turning a gear around, which honestly I can't figure that one out. Besides, you don't want to do that. So if you want to lock a diff, what's the difference? Well, I use a heavy grease, which gives you a little bit of locking, and for the most part these semi-trucks are street trucks. They're not off-road trucks, so locking the diff's not a big deal. But if you do want to lock it, this is my favorite method. Okay, this is silly putty. I played with this when you were a kid. You just pack the diff full of silly putty. It's great for damping the action, and it provides a little shock absorbing for the gears. Plus, if you ever want to get it out, it's easy to take out. Hot glue also works, but it's a little messier, so I prefer silly putty. But today we're not doing that. We're going to do a standard diff, which is on 99% of the trucks I build. So I'll take this heavy grease, I'll slide this in here, and this is the messiest thing on the truck that I do too. I'm going to build up one of these on camera. Okay. Now I put a little grease around the back side of this gear. You don't have to be generous or stingy with it. And drop the washer over. Brass shim here, and then I spread a little bit around inside these. I know you can't see that super good, but you got a film there. Okay, drop that in, drop this in, but before I do that, put a bunch of grease in there. Okay, now I drop it in so that the pins are lined up with the notches in the side of that. And I'll slap some more grease on it. Stick that one over the top. Oh, that's an ooky mess. But it works. And then I'll put the housing on. Now, occasionally I'll find that the housing doesn't sit flat. See how that's not sitting flat? So I don't know why it does this, but sometimes I find it handy to rotate it over the next notch. Now, see, it fits perfect. I don't know why that happens, but sorry, it's out here, but it does. So if it doesn't sit down nice and flat, then you don't want to use the screws to pull it flat. You want to make sure it's nice and flat and stuck down before you screw it. And then a little bit of thread lock. And then we've got these little socket head screws to hold it together. Wipe it off again, just mainly to keep my fingers from getting too hooky for the camera. Okay, so there's our assembled diff unit. Alright, now I'm going to go ahead and assemble the second one off camera, then I'll be back. I'm back. You can see my two completed differentials. So now it's time to get the axle housings set up. Now, the first thing to do is to put in the bearings and then install this gear through the bearings. I want to talk about the bearings a little bit first. So this is a grand hauler kit, and the grand hauler kit comes with 3 bearings in the bag for the rear axles, and then it comes with bushings. These are sealed ball bearings out of a bearing kit. Okay, so here's the deal. These bushings are sintered bronze, and they come in the kits, and okay, they're crap. You can use them if you want. They're okay. Your truck will run, but seriously, you're building a truck that at the minimum is going to be $600-700 in it. So a $20 bearing set is just a teeny portion of the total. So guys, don't use these. Later, it's so hard to take the axles apart and put them in. So I'm going to put these where they belong. My trash can is right down there. Now, okay, so here's the bearings that came in the kit, and here's the bearings that come out of one of Hobbyconcepts' bearing kits. You can immediately see a difference. These bearings do not have a Teflon seal, and these do. Now, does that mean that one is better than the other? No, but what it does mean is the ones with the Teflon seal resist dirt and crap getting in there. So, here's the way I do it. Now, of course, a bearing set has enough bearings to replace all the bearings, but what the heck, may as well use these. So I use a screwdriver and just shove the bearing in with the screwdriver. Now, I have to actually get a smaller tip screwdriver here, something that fits down in, and you can see that bearing pressed in the housing. And then I use the sealed bearing on the outside where dirt and garbage and stuff can get to it when you're running your truck. Okay, now we put our gear through there, and then it gets one of the dreaded E-clips on the outside. These are actually not as bad as I make them sound. You get used to putting them on. I like to have the flat side down here opposite my screwdriver, and then just, or my pliers, and then snap it on. And then there's a joint cup, they call it, that mounts on the outside. Now, they give you a set screw for that. If you're building a king hauler or a globe liner, the original bag has a short set screw in it. I don't know if I had one around here, but you don't want to use the short set screw. They also give you a separate bag with some of these longer set screws, so you want to use the longer one. They changed the design of this part right here with a deeper flat spot, and then put a longer grub screw in the bag. So use the longer one here. Use Loctite on it unless you want to be hunting for it later. And then line it up with the flat spot. Okay, so there we go. That's all completely done. And I'm going to go ahead and do the other two off camera, and then I'll be back. All of these are now prepped and ready to go. So I've got my differentials done. I've got the axle housings ready. So now it's time for the rear axles. I've got a couple here that are finished, but I'm going to do a couple on camera. So the way I do these is I take the E-clip, put it on the axle, and then shove it down on my mat, which snaps it on, and then I drop two bearings on it. Now notice these are both sealed ball bearings. If I was going to use a non-sealed one, I'd use it on the inside and the sealed one on the outside. You'll see that later. And then a clip on the outside edge here. Okay, there's our rear axle, all prepped. And then the other axle, now this one, you want to make sure that you use this on the long axle. Don't use this slot for the clip. Use this one right here. Okay, this one only has two slots in it. It doesn't matter which end you do first. Do the outside end here, as long as you get the bearings on there before you put both clips on it. Alright, so our axles are prepped, our housings are prepped, our differentials are prepped. Now it's time to actually put the assembly together. So I'll be back here in a second and we'll do that. Okay, so now it's time to put these together. So the first thing I'm going to do is grease up this gear here with Tamiya ceramic grease. And I'll grease this up the same way. Some Tamiya ceramic grease. You don't want heavy grease here because you want this to run as freely as possible. And then we'll put the axles on. Now the axle with the long end goes in here. The axle with the pin slides in here. Now notice those slid together just fine. There was no, well, there was a little tiny bit of grease in the hole, but there was no pressure required to put this together. It should fit perfectly. If this long pin doesn't line up with the hole in this other axle, it won't fit together properly. So if there's binding, if there's tension, there's something wrong. Probably you'll notice a gap here. So take it apart, put it back together correctly. Okay, now it's time to drop this in a housing. So let's talk about these housings. Which housing do I use for which? Okay, this housing has a lip on it. Get the grease off my tweezers here. This housing has a lip on it. You can see a lip here. This one. You can see a lip here that runs around the housing. And then it runs here, and it's not right here. And this one does not have a lip. Okay? So these two go together, and you can actually put them together and snap them. Okay, look at that. So if they don't snap together, they're the wrong ones. Okay, so this is a set. So we're going to unsnap it here. We're going to take our completed housing, we're going to pull the bearings apart, and there's a little capture area right here for the bearings. So outer one the inner ones and the outer one. It drops in just like that. Now, once it's dropped in, you cannot pull these out. I've seen cases where somebody will build a truck and this bearing will be here, okay? And then when the truck's done, guess what? You get this, okay? So you gotta get the bearing inside of that lip. Once you do that, you are good to go. Okay? So now you can see it turn our joint cup here. We'll take the axle, other side, we'll snap it over. We're going to test it. Beautiful, nice and smooth, very free. Okay, and then we're going to do the second one, which does not have an output on the other side. And slide these together. Slide the bearings apart. Put it in. And snap. Okay, and it works great. Now notice I haven't even used any bolts, nuts, screws to hold those together yet. Okay, so now it's time to bolt them together, and they just use a standard. They have a place to capture the nut here, and there's a lot of bolts. There's 8 in each one. Okay, so we'll put a bolt in this one. That way it won't unsnap on me. Just like that. Still free. If you tighten these up and there's a bind, something's wrong. Notice now we have our sealed bearing here on the outside. We've got a sealed bearing here on the outside, so everything's beautiful. I'm going to go ahead and put a whole bunch of nuts and bolts in these and finish bolting them up together. So here's our finished rear axle assemblies. You should be able to easily spin it from an axle. And these feel great. Okay, so they're ready to go. Now, we're not done yet because we got to install them on the truck. And here is an area where there's a lot of mistakes, and I do it all the time. So I'm the preacher. Okay, you got to get them in the right place. If you get them in the wrong place, you'll have wheels that do this towards each other, which is not good. So let's go ahead and install these on. This is a grand hauler frame that's all ready for the axle as well. It's almost ready. We'll put a little Loctite on these axle pads here. And this is not a how to build the truck video. This is how to build the rear axles. So I just got this frame ready so I have something to show here. Okay, now the way I do this is I start with the rear axle. Rear axle only has an input, no output. Now you can see here that there's a nib on the top of the axle, and the top would be the part that goes towards the frame. So the axle goes this way. That's the only thing you have to worry about on the rear axle. Okay, get those in the right place. They give you this little metal bracket, they give you a long screw. You drop it through the hole here, and you screw it down to the platform. Same thing on the other side. We'll just put one on. I try to show this step in a lot of my truck builds because I just see this all the time, and I've done it myself. Okay, so that one is now mounted. The nibs are here. On the grand hauler, there's actually a rubber bumper that they hit. A lot of trucks, they don't use that, and you can take these off a grand hauler if you want a little more suspension travel. So now the second axle, same thing. you've got these two nibs here. Okay, they go towards the frame. But now you could go either way. So what do? What we do is we take the transmission hump and we put it on the opposite side of the truck from this transmission hub. So we don't want it this way with both of them on the same side. We want it this way. Do the same thing. Drop the screw through here and mount it down to the plate. And then do a second one. Now, one little thing to watch for here is if you mount it down to the plate and this is underneath this cross frame, you can't get it out. I've done that several times. So just make sure you hold it level while you screw it down. Okay, so there we have our rear axles all built, all assembled, ready to go. Obviously, we have to install the little drive shaft here and the rest of the bolts, but that's how you build the rear axles on a Tamiya semi-truck. And if, like I said, if there's anything binding or weird, then something's wrong. Take it apart, check. The axles should not pull out. That means we get the bearings in the right place. Super. So now I have a new updated rear axle assembly video that I can link to, and a little more information than the last one. Thanks again for watching. Please subscribe, give me a thumbs up if you like my videos, and we do Tamiya semi-trucks on this channel. That's what we do. Occasionally a few other things, but Tamiya semi-trucks mostly, and have a great time doing it. So please subscribe. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you next time.